Have you ever stumbled on a manga that looked like your typical medieval fantasy monster story, but halfway through you realize it's actually about identity, trauma, and the cost of power? And if so, you've probably read Claymore, a dark fantasy manga that asks this question: what if the monster you're fighting is just a preview of what you'll become? In this world, shape-shifting demons called yomas walk among humans, wearing their faces, eating their flesh, and blending in like a serial killer at a dinner party. And the only thing that's standing between humanity and extinction are the Claymores, silvered-eyed warriors who are half human and half Yoma. They're fast, deadly, and terrifyingly efficient, but then so are the monsters they fight. And if that wasn't enough, every time a Claymore uses her Yoma powers, she gets one step closer to losing herself to this power, turning into something even worse, an awakened being. And here's the punchline: these women don't do it out of loyalty or heroism, they do it for a paycheck, which high-key I totally get, no such thing as free labor. But that's besides the point. The townspeople will hire them like pest control for demons, which means it's because of these claymores that humanity is even alive still. But at the same time, they fear them just as much as they fear the Yomas. To such an extent, they're scared to even look them in the eyes. And that's sad. But we're not here to be sad. No, we're here to talk about Claire, the lowest ranking claymore in her generation, but also the most stubborn. And during what should have been a normal mission, she ends up saving a boy named Rocky. And after that, unfortunately, fate decides the plot needs to start, so we're shown her tragic past, where she's saved by Teresa of the Faint Smile, the strongest claymore to ever live. But then, Teresa's killed by her own successor, Priscilla, another claymore who lost control and awakened into something practically unstoppable. But that's the thing, practically. So Claire has dedicated the rest of her life, not for glory, not for duty, but solely for revenge. And I'm not gonna hold you, that's kinda tough. Claire kinda tough. I'm gonna say that a lot, but Claymore kinda tough. And that's not even the brunt of it. As the story continues, we realize that her real enemy isn't exactly the Yoma. It's the organization that made her. So what starts off as a story about hunting demons becomes a rebellion against the system that created them. Claymores aren't just soldiers, they're experiments. Disposable weapons in a century-old war no one asked for. And if you only watched the anime, you only had half the story, because the 2007 Madhouse series stopped right before things actually got insane. They changed the ending and left the manga's final war untouched. So if you think you know Claymore because you saw the anime back in the day, then let me tell you, my friends, you don't know ball, so buckle up. We're about to dig into what made this series the most underrated dark fantasy ever published in Shonen Jump, and why it might just be the sword-swinging tragedy that Shonen Jump just wasn't ready for. So, hey, I'm Remy, and I just want to know if anyone's checked on Claymore, and if not, let's, because it's kinda tough. So before Claymore was slicing up monsters and breaking hearts, its creator Norihiro Yagi was writing comedy, oddly enough. Seriously, before the gore and the trauma, there were punchlines. From 1992 to 2000, Yagi was known for writing Angel Densetsu, a wholesome comedy about a kind-hearted kid who looked like he crawled out of a crime documentary, as the one who did the crime. And because he looks the way he does, everyone assumes he's a delinquent, but the poor guy just wants friends. It ran in monthly Shonen Jump, and while it couldn't be more different from Claymore in tone, you could probably spot signs of his early style, especially in the way he draws expressive faces, strong female characters, and the wings. My guy really loves wings. But after Angel Densetsu ended, Yagi apparently decided that being funny was low-key kinda overrated. So in 2001, he went full 180 and gave us Claymore, a brutal dark fantasy about a half-human, half-monster, warriors fighting to survive in a medieval world straight out of a nightmare. And let's be honest here, without context, which we really didn't have at the time, this shift was wild. It's like going from My Neighbor Totoro, blinking, and then all of a sudden you're watching Attack on Titan overnight. Still though, Yagi wasn't pulling this world out of thin air. Claymore as a whole pulls from a whole mixture of different influences. You got the one everyone can guess, aka Berserk, from its monsters, creatures, cursed destinies, and enough oversized swords to make Cloud Strife blush a little bit. There's also clearly a lot of inspiration from mystical female warriors like the Amazons of Greek legend or Japan's Onabugashas, who were basically trained warriors who stayed at home to protect their families during times of conflict, which low-key, super cool. So if you get the chance, I say look it up. It's some honestly really cool history there. And it goes even deeper than that. The name Claymore comes from the Scottish dialect Cladimor, which means great sword. I am so sorry if I just butchered that. I tried it. I obviously don't speak Scottish dialect, but I gave it my best shot. Like it or love it. Anyway. So yes, the title literally means big sword. And if you couldn't tell by now, big swords are cool. And honestly, that's the kind of energy this series thrives on. And if you thought the concept of slicing humans with demon flesh to make super soldiers sound something out of a horror novel, well, you'll be right. That's straight up Frankenstein DNA right there. And I mean like the scientist, not the monster, because obviously the monster is not the scientist. And is that not mad cool? But back on topic, Claymore started its run in Monthly Shonen Jump back in 2001 and stayed there until the magazine shut down in 2007. After that, it moved over to Jump Square, where it kept the lights on until 2014, when the story finally reached its conclusion. And by then, the manga had earned a cult following and even got an anime adaptation by Madhouse in 2007. The anime also ran for 26 episodes, and like a lot of mid-2000 adaptations, unfortunately had to have an original conclusion because the manga wasn't finished yet at the time. Which honestly might be one of the biggest tragedies in the Claymore community, because a lot of the anime-only fans never got to the crazy massive plot twist, which is such a shame, honestly. Okay, hey, it's editing Remy. So during the course of writing and watching all this stuff for the video, I found out that Claymore got taken off of Crunchyroll, which is, I think, the last place to legally watch it. So that sucks. Normally, I don't really talk about owning physical media, but if y'all guys couldn't tell, I'm a big physical media kind of head. I love mangas, so I would love to have every physical manga of anything I've ever read. Like, one of my life goals is to own every copy of One Piece. But that being said, it's a real shame that you just can't find this anymore. Luckily, I have a guy that has everything you could ever want physical media wise, so I just kind of hit him up for clips and stuff if I really needed it. But it's a shame because, like, you don't have a place to legally watch this anymore, which is such a shame because, you know, everyone's trying to shut down, quote unquote, those sites that people watch and read stuff on. But it's like, how else are we supposed to read this media? Y'all take it down off of streaming services haphazardly, and then you're just out of luck for fans who, like, I love this series, or I want to recommend this series to somebody. Well, oh, too bad, now it's in the ether and no one could ever watch it. So that just really sucks. And I hate that I happened to find this when I was reviewing and watching stuff for this video. That really sucks because I really like Claymore. You're gonna tell from the course of this video, I really like Claymore. And it just really sucks that people can't find it anymore. And that's a shame. I genuinely feel like that's a shame. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So, you know, if you get the chance, buy physical media, guys. Just rack it up. You know, they're gonna be filling a landfill if we don't buy it anyway. So just, if you can, go to Amazon if it's on Amazon. I'm gonna post a link if it's on Amazon. But yeah, just, I don't know. That sucks. That honestly kind of killed my buzz while editing this, and I found that out. But okay, back to the actual script now. Bye! When it comes to Norihiro Yagi, he's one of those creators who somehow went from writing awkward high school comedies to drawing women decapitating demons before breakfast. And if that's not range, I don't know what is. Born in Okinawa sometime between 1968 or 1969, because even his birthday is shrouded in mystery, Yagi's first big break came when he won the 32nd Akatsuka Award for his one-shot called Undead Man in 1990. Which in hindsight, low-key feels like foreshadowing for Claymore, doesn't it? But once again though, before diving headfirst into a dark fantasy, Yagi spent nearly a decade writing Angel Densetsu, a pure high school comedy about a kind-hearted boy who looks like he steps on Legos every morning and stubs his toe in the corner of his bed every night. Just an uncomfortable existence for my guy. And once again, this series ran from 1992 to 2000 in Monthly Shonen Jump. And while the series is mostly about misunderstandings and goofy school chaos, it gave Yagi time to refine his signature expressive face, his intense eye motif, and characters who look like they're just one bad day away from transforming into a boss fight. And after this series, as you know, my guy took a hard left turn from punchlines to decapitation. He's gone on record to state that he loves horror and has always wanted to write a story around warriors fighting monsters. And because of this, well, Claymore was born, a world drenched in tragedy, swords, and just enough gore to make you question if this is actually supposed to be published in Shonen Jump or something a bit more mature. And it wasn't just the themes that changed, his art drastically evolved also. While his previous soft and exaggerated look worked really well for Angel Densetsu, when it came to Claymore, Claymore demanded something more. Claymore demanded precision. With his new style, he cleaned up his art incredibly. Minimalistic backgrounds that made every slash and transformation hit harder, using shading to put emphasis on action and emotion, and blending movement with manga panel layouts to help emphasize the speed of characters. And with this new tone, this helped this series last from 2001 to 2014, which makes Claymore a 13-year-old odyssey that proved that Yagi wasn't just switching genres, he was mastering them. And don't get me wrong, he doesn't stop there. After Claymore, Yagi kept the fantasy vibe alive with his last series, Ariadne in the Blue Sky, from 2017 to 2023, a tonally way lighter series about sky-flaring adventures and friendships and freedom. In other words, think of this as his way of touching grass after all those years of slaying monsters and guts and despair. Also, low-key, I really like this series also. I'm not going to talk about it in this video heavily, but it's a really fun series. If you get the chance, please read it. And even more recently, in 2024, he made his return to Shueisha with his one-shot called Nights in the Corpse, which just goes to show that man definitely has a type of genre, and it probably is dark fantasy. But even outside the page, he's pretty cool. Yagi apparently is really into hard rock, video games, driving, and martial arts, which honestly explains a lot. If you're into Iron Maiden while practicing karate, you're not writing rom-coms for a living, let's just be honest. No sir, you're creating eldritch horrors that need to be slayed by a Claymore. And as cool as I'm making this series sounds, and it is, don't get me wrong, when it comes to the real life history of Claymore, it's a little bit complicated and it's a little bit tough, but not like the cool way I've been saying tough in this video, but like this like tough, like oof, you hate to see it kind of tough. So here's the thing, Claymore didn't just fight monsters in the story, it also had to survive real life publishing chaos. As I've mentioned a couple times already, when Claymore first started in 2001, it ran in monthly Shonen Jump, which at the time was like the cooler older cousin of Weekly Shonen Jump. But by the mid-2000s, let me be honest with you, that cousin, it wasn't doing so hot. Sales were tanking, like a comeback from a one-hit wonder or a Disney child star trying to be a serious actor for his comeback. That's the levels of tanking I'm talking about. And because of this, Shueisha eventually pulled the plug by 2007. And with that, the magazine was officially done. And just like that, Claymore was suddenly homeless. And if there's one thing you don't want to be in the manga world, it's to be a wandering series that has nowhere to be serialized. I mean, do y'all guys not know the history behind Shaman King? I love that series, but man, that is a cautionary tale if I've ever heard one. But thankfully, here's where things get a little bit interesting. So right after Monthly Shonen Jump closed, Claymore got to sleep on the couch at Weekly Shonen Jump. So for a brief and glorious moment, Claymore was technically in the same lineup as One Piece, Bleach, and Naruto. It's like imagine walking into the office one day, you see Luffy and Naruto and Ichigo at the water cooler, and then you see freaking Claire over there in the corner just staring daggers at everybody with their giant Claymore. Like, it's the goth kid at the party. But unfortunately, this crossover, quote unquote, wouldn't last very long. Claymore was only in Jump from July to October of 2007. Just imagine as the weirdest summer internship no one ever wanted. But thankfully, once this was over, Claymore found its new home at Jump Square, a fresh monthly magazine that launched in November, which became Claymore's permanent base until the end of the series. But sadly, that wasn't the only issue when the magazine closed down, because in 2007, that's when the anime also wrapped up. At that point, Studio Madhouse had caught up to the magazine, so instead of just waiting, they did the classic early 2000s thing of creating their own ending, and it is definitely an ending. I'm not gonna say it was bad, but it was definitely an ending, but it wasn't the ending. And because of this, a lot of fans walked away thinking Claymore was just one of those dark fantasy anime with no real conclusion. But man, when I tell you that manga kept evolving, adding entire arcs, wars, and characters that the anime never even touched. And oddly enough, losing that magazine didn't kill Claymore. It forced it to grow. And is that not super cool? So yeah, while this series went through a lot of editorial purgatory and a premature anime send-off, it ultimately thrived at Jump Square. It got to finish on its own terms, and you gotta recognize that's honestly pretty impressive because that's something not every shonen series gets. Looking at you, Iron Knight. I know nobody knows about this one. I actually like this manga. Nobody knew about this. I miss you. You had so much potential. But when it comes to Claymore, one of the cooler things about the series is, if it had a tagline, it'd probably be this: what if the real monster was the thing keeping you alive? Because at its core, this series is one long tragic tug-of-war between humanity and monstrosity. With the Claymores themselves being half human, half Yomas, warriors built to fight monsters using the same powers that turn them into one. Not to mention, they're even called silver-eyed witches by the people they protect, which is honestly rude if you just think about it. Another thing that's really interesting about Claymore, their life is all about balance. If they tap into too much of their Yoma energy, they risk awakening, losing every trace of their humanity in exchange for unstoppable power. But on the other hand, if they don't use that power at all, they risk dying to a Yoma. So every battle is both external and internal. They're fighting the monsters in front of them and the ones inside of them. It's tragic, it's poetic, and it's a great metaphor for burnout if you really think about it. And if that wasn't enough, the cruelty of the series doesn't stop there. Introducing the organization, the shadowy group running everything from behind the scenes. They created the Claymores to be perfect weapons. They never allowed them to be fully human, never allowed them to be fully free. To them, the monsters are their strength, therefore the humanity of the Claymore is their weakness. And that's the horror of the series. But on a less quote-unquote horror topic, we have themes of revenge found with Claire. Because Claire's entire journey starts with vengeance, a personal fiery promise to hunt down Priscilla, the creature who stole her surrogate mother to Teresa's life. And on this journey of revenge, she becomes self-destructive and incredibly focused. And don't get me wrong, Claire is not the only Claymore with the revenge setting. To some extent, revenge gives these women purpose on what they do throughout the course of the story. Revenge for betrayal, revenge for their loved ones, revenge in general, which ironically enough, traps them in the same pain they're trying to escape. The pain of trauma, of loss, the endless loop of killing that a majority of our main Claymores are just kinda tired of. And it isn't until they stop looking for revenge to start fighting for each other where redemption slowly creeps into the series. And honestly, that's a really cool payoff for a series-long kind of deep dive into like the cycles of violence and inner demons. But enough of that, let's talk about betrayal, because what is a good series without betrayal? Because in Claymore, you don't just have monsters, you have manipulators. The organization is basically a corporate nightmare with swords. They control the warriors, they hide the truth, and they pit them against each other to maintain power. They're so bad, they even weaponize trauma. Like, who does that? Because nothing says team bonding like being forced to fight your best friend in the name of science. And that sucks, but no, what's really amazing? When they finally shake off the controls, wake up, and you know what? Like, I'm done. I'm done following orders. We're starting a rebellion. Oh, it's great. It's great. And in pure shonen fashion, oh, baby, they turn that pain into purpose. It becomes a rebellion not just against the monsters, but against the entire organization that made them. And through all this tragedy, there's something quite beautiful found there, and it's sisterhood. Because despite being ranked differently, separated, and trained to not trust one another, these women find family in the battlefield. Claire, Maria, Helen, and Deneve don't just fight side by side, they survive because of each other. They laugh together, they mourn together, and they remind each other what it means to be human, in a world that's doing its best to try to strip that away from them. It's that mix, the monsters, the vengeance, the manipulation, and the sisterhood that make Claymore more than just a dark fantasy. It's about identity, trauma, and finding warmth in a world that has gone cold to the touch. And honestly, I think that's the real magic behind Claymore. That's what keeps people coming back. I mean, don't get me wrong, Claymore in general is mad tough. We can't ignore all the crazy fights, the cool transformations, the big swords, and everything else that makes the series so cool. But it's also more than that. It's about the kind of person that can survive the pain, the loss, the trauma, the manipulation, and what you become after all that is done. Who you are as a survivor. And that's really cool in my opinion. So when it comes to Claymore's main characters and factions, I would say think of it like a band. Claire would be the lead singer, Teresa would be the legendary ex-member that everyone still talks about, and Priscilla would be the one who burned down the studio. And man, she burned down that studio for like no reason. She just angry about it. And once again, at the center of all that chaos is our silver-eyed protagonist, Claire, ranked dead last, number 47 out of 47. She's technically the weakest Claymore of her generation. But that's kind of the point, because unlike the other Claymores, Claire isn't half human and half Yoma, she's half human and half Teresa. Which, kinda weird, but it tracks with context. She volunteered to become a Claymore using the remains of her fallen mentor / mother figure, the strongest warrior to ever live. She's carrying more than just a heavy sword, she's carrying a legacy in her veins. It's tragic, poetic, and a little metal if you think about it. Like I keep saying, Claire kinda tough with it. I'm just saying she kinda tough. And then obviously we gotta talk about the mother figure herself, the queen of the battlefield, Teresa the Faint Smile. She's cool, calm, and collective, and so powerful, she could destroy a Yoma before the Yoma even blinks. She was snapped, and obviously kinda tough. Also, she's the reason Claire even picks up a sword in the first place. But then, Teresa's story unfortunately ends with betrayal from her number 2, Priscilla. And her death doesn't just start Claire's revenge journey, it sets the tone for the entire Claymore world, and that power always comes with pain. And speaking of human pain, we gotta talk about Rocky, who turns out to be the normal guy in a world full of traumatized superwomen and literal demons. He starts off as a scared kid who lost his entire family to Yoma, but instead of becoming another casualty, he decides to follow Claire. And over time, Rocky learns how to fight and grows stronger. And he's one of the few humans that take time out of their day to actually understand the Claymore, potentially proving that humanity isn't a weakness, it can be what actually saves them at the end of the day. And then there's Priscilla, a name that probably triggers every Claymore fan, like Rachel from Tower of God does. Yo, all my homies still hate Rachel to this day. Rachel sucks. But back on Priscilla. Once the number 2 warrior, now an unhinged godlike monster that can rip cities apart. She's the one who killed Teresa and became an awakened being, consumed by the power she couldn't control. Therefore, she's not just Claire's enemy, she's the physical embodiment of what happens when you lose your humanity completely. In a way, she's kind of tragic, but at the same time, this isn't Demon Slayer, so I don't feel bad for the bad guys because they had a sad backstory. That always irked me about Demon Slayer. Like, I'm sorry, I had a rough childhood. So now you eat people as an adult? That doesn't justify it, big dog. The ends don't justify the means, and whatever. I'm gonna have a Demon Slayer rant. Y'all don't want that. Okay, back to this. But thankfully, throughout her journey, Claire isn't alone. Besides Rocky, she meets others who have been burned by the same system, aka the 7 Ghosts. And they're the survivors of the Northern Campaign who go from rivals to full-blown rebellion squad, led by Maria the Phantom. They're a found family of broken warriors who decide they've had enough of the organization's lies. And I'm not gonna hold you, the 7 Ghosts is kinda tough. They kinda tough. With Maria the Brains and the Blade, Helen being the snake arms, which low-key, kinda weird, but high-key, you know, they they're pretty effective in a fight, I'm not gonna hold you. And one of my favorite deniv, the twin sword, the reliable one, the tanky one, the one that doesn't give up, she's honestly pretty cool. And then you have Cynthia the Calm Sword, the quiet healer holding it all together. And in hindsight, they're basically the anti-organization version of a Power Rangers team. Go, go, Trauma Ranger. it's trauma. Oh, goodness, these girls have gone through so much. And speaking of trauma, we have to talk about the organization. They're the biggest groups of villains you never see swing a sword. They're the ones who made the Claymores in the first place, splicing human and Yoma flesh like they're running some medieval biotech startup lab, and they're calling these crimes against humanity science. But what's the ultimate goal of the organization? To create the ultimate weapon by pushing their warriors past their limits, even if it breaks them. Another way of thinking about this, if you think about the poison snake jar. For example, in that scenario, you put a bunch of poisonous snakes into a jar, and the only one that survives at the end of it is the strongest and most venomous snake. And it seems like that was the organization's goal, to create the strongest thing in the jar. But in this case, the jar is an island full of Yoma and Claymores. But back to the Claymores. The Claymores aren't heroes by choice, they're tools by design. And once they start realizing the truth, that's when the rebellion begins. And then you got the Yoma, the so-called monsters of the world. They shapeshift, they devour humans, and they hide among them, which is terrifyingly enough, but the twist is, they're not some supernatural force of nature, they're bioweapons made by the organization, using the flesh of a dead-like dragon being called Astrakhan. So basically, this world's problem was created by the same people trying to fix it. And I remember when I read that for the first time back in high school, that blew my little teenage brain, because I was like, what? They're creating the problem and selling the solution? I didn't know that was as common as it was in real life, but back then me, as a naive high schooler, was blown back by that. And finally, we can now talk about the awakened beings. Claymores who gave into their inner Yoma and transformed completely into monsters. They're tragic, they're beautiful, and they're horrifying. Each one is super unique looking, and to cover their own tracks, the organization spreads propaganda calling them vicious eaters. But if you really think about it, that's like calling a kaiju a very large lizard. Like, yeah, we can all tell that they're very vicious eaters. It's not a secret, big dog. But even among awakened beings, there are a hierarchy, and the ones on top are called the Abyssal ones, the godlike former number one who basically runs their own territories. First up, you have my favorite, Isley. She's stoic, noble, and terrifying. Then you have Riffle of the West, both creepy and oddly charming in her own unique way. Then Lucy of the South, who is honestly like a monster. Her awakening was so catastrophic, it's literally called a failed experiment. And they represent what happens when power goes unchecked, aka the final stage of becoming something you swore to destroy. And you get all of this in Claymore. Between Claire's vengeance, Teresa's legacy, Priscilla's madness, and the organization's manipulation, Claymore gives you a cast where everyone's haunted by something, but at the same time, everyone's fighting for something too. You don't just watch these warriors slay monsters, you watch them fight for a reason to still be human after the killing stops, which is so freaking tough, man. Oh, this story is so tough, and I'm finna geek about this story because we about to talk about it, but this story is so good, and Claymore is so underrated. But all right, here we go. Let's finally talk story, because Claymore doesn't just have a plot. In a way, it has two, depending on how deep you went down the rabbit hole. You've got the anime that hits like a fast punch to the gut, but on the other hand, then you have the manga that feels like a hot, brutal knife stabbing you and slowly rotating in your abdomen for years, turning, grinding you, hurting you, but at the same time, you kinda like it. Because this story is brutal, unforgiving, and something that you just don't forget when you lock in with it. Because Claire's revenge story is not your standard shonen story. She's not yelling about friendship, becoming the pirate king, or saving Soul Society. She's here to get it back in blood, because all she wants to do is kill Priscilla, the monster who murdered her surrogate mother, Teresa. You're not gonna find a save the world speech here, no power of friendship, none of that. You're just gonna get cold, burning vengeance. You see where the Berserk vibes come from? Like, dude, this story, man, this right here, this the one. Eventually, on this journey, Claire meets Rock, a kid whose family was eaten by Yoma. He's the first person to make her feel human again. And now that he's here, she just can't let herself get turned into a monster. She's got something to protect now. So in its own really messed up and unique way, it's kind of sweet. And throughout the course of this journey, we get hit with Claire's flashbacks so we understand her better as a character. We fight Yomas, we learn more about the Claymores, we find out about Teresa, we find out about Priscilla. All this stuff happens as the story progresses. And during that time, a couple light bulbs go off for other Claymores, including Claire. Like when it's weird when the organization abandons them mid-mission. That's when some light bulbs start to go off. These women aren't just soldiers, they're lab rats. and the people that they're protecting, they finally come to terms with it that they'll burn them at the stake if given the chance, especially when the Northern Campaign starts. And that mission was practically just a suicide squad with swords instead of guns and superpowers. And as the mission continues, Claire and her squad fight hundreds of awakened beings under Isley's command, and it gets crazy. You feel every swing like a heartbeat before it stops. Jean sacrifices herself to stop Claire from going full awakening, and honestly, it's pretty tragic, and that's not even the worst part of this arc. Now, if you watch the anime, this is where things get kind of weird, because this is where the anime just kind of stops. Claire's fight with Priscilla, everyone kind of just goes home at the end of this. Roll credits, no answer, no closure, no what happens next. It just kind of ends. But that also goes back to the whole monthly Shonen Jump kind of closing down in 2007. So that's why this is weird. In a really funny way, it's like someone ripped out the last third of your favorite movie out of the DVD box, handed you a note with the empty box and said, hey, how about you use your imagination like it's SpongeBob, and then nothing, because that's where the anime ends. But the manga though, the manga keeps going. We catch up with our characters 7 years later, the survivors, also known as the Seven Ghosts, which I'll be so for real, it's such a hard epithet, dog. It's so cool. They're stronger now, they're smarter, and they're done taking orders. It's like if the Girl Scouts decided to unionize and overthrow their employers and take all the cookie sales from themselves. And meanwhile, Rock is still around. He didn't die. He's been training with Isley. Yes, the Isley, the Ice Queen, which, like, what is such a cool thing for my boy. It's so cool. He becomes an actual swordsman, and Claire, well, she's still on that revenge grind, but now that grind has a little bit of rebellion in there. So when I tell you, Claire is so stupid tough, bro, it's dumb. Claire is so tough. But then, when you think it's done with its plot reveals, you find out that this is not a dark fantasy, it is sci-fi. Claymore is sci-fi. It's been sci-fi the entire time. I'm talking away from the mic because I'm kind of yelling. But, I remember reading this for the first time and my ankles, no, my ACL, no, my entire lower body broke because I thought they was going right, but they said, actually, we're going left. I was never the same. I was never the same, dog. And look, you can try to convince me that it's not sci-fi, but I don't care. I'm going to interpret Claymore as a sci-fi novel with high fantasy elements, because when you find out everything's bioengineering and it's like, oh, you're actually on an island. This isn't the entire world. You're in a contained zone. This is all one big experiment. This is just science. This is sci-fi. Bruh. This is practically just Berserk meets Attack on Titan. And it's so cool. And this series is so tough, and not enough people talk about it anymore. And I don't get why. It's so good. Okay, I gotta breathe. Because in this giant reveal, we find out that the world of Claymore is just a test site. It's an island-sized experiment for a bigger war happening somewhere else. The organization, they're not trying to save humanity, they're trying to weaponize it. They even resurrect the OG #1 Claymore, because it turns out dying once wasn't enough, they gotta keep doing it. And eventually, when Claire absorbs the consciousness of Luciella and Raffaella, she unlocks the final truth and the key to ending this entire cycle of violence. And a little bit after this, Priscilla returns for the ultimate rematch, stronger and more twisted than ever. But Claire doesn't just awaken in this case, because we've seen Claire's awakening. It's pretty messed up in all honesty, but this time, she does something better. She brings back Teresa, fully, beautifully, and terrifying, and with a smile. And Claire lets her finish it. And we finally get the rematch we've been waiting for the entire series. No interruption, no cutaways, no flashback, nothing to take you out of the fight. All you get here is justice, poetic justice in sword form. And then Teresa wins. And when we finally get Priscilla's final words, she doesn't scream. She says something of relief. She was tired being a monster, apparently. And after that, all things considered, the ending is honestly kind of quiet. No big war speech, no giant explosions, just Claire and Rock walking into the sunset. And I'm okay with that, because this is the piece she's been fighting for since page 1. And if you couldn't tell by now, she's well past earned this. So, the biggest difference between the anime and the manga isn't just how much story you get, it's how much it means. The anime gave us a taste, the manga gave us a full meal, complete with desserts, emotional closure, and a side of existential dread you could only find in black and white. And is that not tough? I will say this time and time again. Claymore has some of the coolest characters in Shonen nobody talks about. The premise is fun, the art's amazing, and the story is almost perfect in my opinion. You can disagree with me, but that's fine, because you're allowed to do that. But for me, this is one of those top tier stories that no one talks about. And I wanted to talk about it. Because like I said earlier, this is Berserk meets Attack on Titan. And is that not the coolest thing you've ever heard of? So what about the reception for the series? So here's the thing about Claymore. It didn't just come out swinging, it came out with a giant sword bigger than most of its characters. So when it hit monthly Shonen Jump in 2001, readers didn't fully know what they were signing up for, but they stayed. Not because it was trendy, but because it was different. People loved this series for a reason. It gave us an eerie medieval-inspired world full of monsters, half humans, and morally bankrupt scientists. It wasn't sunshine and training arcs, it was trauma, betrayal, and existential dread wrapped in shiny white armor. So, without a shadow of a doubt, it stood out among its peers. While Naruto was screaming about Hokages and friendship, you had Claymore quietly whispering, yo, what if you sold your soul just to survive? And that's just kinda tough. Critics praised the strong female cast, which is something that's still surprisingly rare in Shonen Jump. And don't get me wrong, Jump nowadays has some really cool female characters like Maki. Maki's tough, bro. Maki's like one of my favorite characters from JJK. Maki's so cool. But what was one of the cool things about Claymore is that the female cast didn't have to be reduced to side characters, love interests, or just comic relief. They were stoic, fierce, broken, and doing their best to try to hold on to the scraps of humanity they had left. And reviewers and viewers noticed that. No jealousy subplot, no oops, I tripped into your arm moments, just warriors being warriors. And that alone made Claymore feel ahead of its time. And we gotta talk about Yagi's art. Those monsters designed straight nightmare fuel. Every awakened being looks like a fever dream scolded by someone who's seen too much of the other side. What is the other side? I don't know, ask Lovecraft, I'm not the guy. But it's still, they've seen too much of the other side. And not to mention, each fight in this series felt like it had weight. Swords had a crunch to it, limbs snapped, and when someone died, you hurt. It made you feel things. But then, the Berserk comparisons started rolling in because of course they did. Two dark fantasies with giant swords and bigger trauma. It was inevitable. And it sucks. Because everybody started calling Claymore Berserk's little sister. And I get it, I understand it, it's completely obvious why you did that. But if you had just stayed the course and read Claymore, you would have realized it's just more than a dark fantasy shonen. Was this comparison unfair? Yeah. But it's also hard to avoid standing beneath the shadow of a genre titan, especially when Berserk was redefining the entire dark fantasy genre. While Yagi was trying to build something equally ambitious, just cleaner and more structured, still, Claymore carved out its own niche. Fans loved its mysteries, questions about the organizations, the experiments, and what the world truly was. But all that to say, by the final arc, even some loyal fans started to admit things got a bit dense. Too many characters, too many subplots, and it felt like the story needed to breathe, but the manga just kept sprinting. So even to this day, while Claymore may stay respected, it never reached mainstream shonen hit status. Still, the fanbase loyal, we all never left. We stuck around through the forums, the Reddit threads, the random long YouTube video retrospective on the franchise. Hello. They kept going and saying the same things. If you like the anime, read the manga. It's actually finished. Now we come to 2025. And the energy has definitely shifted. Claymore is no longer underrated, it's criminally underrated. It was one of those series people discover late and go, oh wait, yo, I remember this one. Why does nobody talk about this? Because it earned its classic status. Complete story, powerful themes, and a world that felt more grounded than half the stuff released today. But then, it's only getting harder and harder to find this media online. But apparently, Claymore is supposed to be getting a live action adaptation, which, I get it, cue the collective groans. Don't get me wrong. I understand it. Live action anime tends to be very bad, and it normally splits the fandom in two camps. One half being optimistic, hi hello, I'm in that camp, and the other half being they're gonna massacre my girl and do really horrible things and probably do something nobody likes, something random, you know? It's just inevitable that happens, and I get it, a lot of fans don't like that, but at the same time, One Piece live action is actually pretty good. So, you know what? Fingers crossed, maybe somebody's gonna lock in and make a really good show. You never know. And man, yeah, I think that's about it for Claymore. I'm gonna call it here. So at its core, Claymore isn't just about the monsters, revenge, or who can even swing the biggest sword, but let's be honest though, big swords are still mad cool. It's about what it means to stay human when everything else around you is trying to take that away. Claire, Teresa, Maria, all of them, they weren't heroes because they were the strongest. They're heroes because they kept going. Even when the organization lied to them, even when the world feared them, even when the monsters outside and inside were trying to win, they kept holding on to that tiny, fragile thread of who they really were and who they wanted to be. Because surviving the fight isn't always about power or skill. Sometimes it's about remembering why you picked up the sword in the first place. For Claire, it was love. For others, it was vengeance, loyalty, or redemption. But in the end, they all found something worth fighting for. And that's what kept them from turning into the very monsters they hunted. And maybe that's the lesson Claymore leaves us with. That you don't need to let anyone define who you are. Your worth or how far you go can only be determined by you and you alone. People might call you a weapon, a failure, or a lost cause, but remember why you started whatever you're doing. You're the person who picked up the metaphysical sword. You're the person that dragged that sword through the dirt to get as far as you did. No one else did but you. You're already stronger than you'll ever know, so whether it be you're battling inner demons, life's chaos, or just trying to survive another week, hold your ground and keep that silver edge sharp. Because the world's full of monsters, but the most human thing you can do is keep fighting like yourself. And again, just for the record, big swords, still mad cool, and Claymore is mad tough. So, hey, I'm Remy. Thanks for letting me check out Claymore. Like, subscribe, and hype the video, and I will see you in the next one. Y'all be easy. Later. Bye. Okay, end of the video. Consciousness talking. This is off script. Claymore is so cool, bro. I love Claymore so much. Hopefully I kind of just put that out there on this recording. Claymore is so cool. This is like how long is this? This is a 25-page recording of how much I like Claymore. And honestly, I feel like it could have been longer. Like, obviously, I don't like to spoil the entire story when I talk about the plot segments, but like, dude, please go read or watch Claymore. It's so good. I love it so much. It's such an amazing series. It deserves all its flowers. Claymore's so dope. But yeah, I think that'll be it for me. Once again, I'm Remy, signing out. I think this is supposed to come out on Halloween, so happy Halloween if this comes out. It's a scary video. I was gonna do Hellsing, but I didn't feel like doing Hellsing. So you got Claymore instead. So, there you go. So once again, thank y'all guys for watching the video. Like, subscribe, and all the other fun stuff. I will see y'all in the next video. Thank you once again for watching. If you got this far, you are amazing. I'm so glad you're here. I will see y'all in the next one. Later. Bye. Okay, hey, I'm back again. Sorry about all the reused clips. Surprisingly, for something you cannot legally watch on the internet anymore, there is a surprisingly amount of copyright on it. And normally the way I edit clips, it's fine, but for some reason, when it comes to Claymore, dog, they are not playing around, so I'm reusing a lot of clips. And normally I don't want to do that in my videos, but it's either this or like awkward PNGs. So my bad. I'm gonna try to avoid something like this in the future, but just for right now, bear with it. I am so sorry. This is like the 4th time I have tried uploading this. At this point, I'm just leaving this note at the end. Like, this is extra. This was not at the original video, but like, I'm so tired of messing with this. So here you go. My bad. I will do better in the future so we don't have to reuse clips like this. Okay, bye. Have a good day.